Welcome to Refinery Injury Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Refinery Injury Podcast with Brooks Harrison. Brooks is a Texas trial attorney dedicated to representing refinery and plant workers who suffer catastrophic injuries in explosions, fires, and chemical accidents across the South. I'm Heidi Mack, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about what really goes into proving fault after a refinery explosion. Thank you again for coming on, Brooks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's get to it. So you worked on refinery explosion cases across the South. When a disaster does happen, what are the first questions that you and your team start asking?
Well, the very first question that I would always ask is, what experts do we need? So we need to get from interviewing witnesses and folks that are out that were on site. We'll do that very early on, like immediately. And it's from those interviews and from obviously visiting with our client that gives us a pretty good idea. This isn't our first explosion. This isn't our first incident. Gives us a pretty good idea of what experts we probably need to lean towards, and then start getting them involved. And then literally within a week, you will have experts hired, and those experts will be on the scene investigating the root cause analysis with the premise owner, the refinery, and the governmental entities as well, and their lawyers. Their lawyers are always there.
Is that the main goal of investigation after an explosion? Like what you just said, getting all that stuff and trying to uncover?
That is in every single refinery incident. It immediately it goes 0 to 60 the moment it happens. And so even though the client or the injured party is not engaged in investigating it, the company is literally at a breakneck pace attempting to investigate it. As we spoke about before, they're not investigating it in an attempt to find fault on themselves. So, I mean, investigations are supposed to be investigations and let the chips fall where they may. That's the importance of having your representative, somebody looking out for your best interest, to be involved in that investigation to make sure you keep the company and their little goons kind of straight.
So then in those situations, how do you go about gathering the evidence when a lot of the times those places are often destroyed or they're unsafe?
Right. It's I mean, just like we have seen in major federal investigations into terrorism. It's very similar to that. You essentially you bring in the experts that are needed for that specific issue, and then they basically deconstruct it to construct it. So, I mean, it's something that then that's the importance of the experts. That's why you don't go hire a family lawyer to go out there and take a look at it. You hire somebody that actually does this for a living, that has the resources and the knowledge and obviously the experts to be able to come out and address things like this.
Can we go a little deeper, like on those experts and specialists? Like, do they have specific names that who figure out what caused the blast?
Well, it honestly, yes, they all do, and they're all so, and that's why it's so difficult to hypothetically discuss it, is because it's so specific. And I mean, I'm for the same reason you're not going to hire a family lawyer to represent you in a refinery incident, is the same reason I'm not going to go hire some general expert, say some sort of liability expert, to to go out and look at something that he's never looked at or he does not have the expertise to look at. So if it was a gas fed fire that was going through whatever processes, immediately I would know I would need a fire expert, and we have those ready to go. We actually just wrapped up a pretty large case with who I consider one of the best in the business, and he would also uh, require me to go out and bring in another fellow that used to work there, always works with us, usually whenever the fire expert, and it's more of a process tech that goes through the proper protocol of how the flow should be in that unit, and how it shouldn't have leaked, and how it shouldn't have sparked, and how it shouldn't have been a fire, and how it shouldn't have blown up. So That's essentially what ends up happening and our experts, just like myself, just like I'll use my group of lawyers and we'll build your firm out of those group of lawyers. Our experts do very much the same thing and do it the same way. So for a specific incident, not every expert's needed on every case. So you get those experts that are directly related to your incident, and then you build your expert team just like you built your lawyer team, and that's the way you're able to take on multi-billion-dollar corporations.
Well, then, yeah. So if we can kind of go towards like evidence a little bit, on that refinery side, they seem to keep huge amounts of safety and maintenance data. Like, how important are those internal records for you showing what the company's done wrong?
That's what they say. That's the problem. Essentially, federal regulations are just a baseline of what's required. OSHA regs are a baseline of what's required, and then today they've gone into this voluntary protection stuff, and OSHA is so heavily underfunded that at this point, the big refineries, the big chemical plants, those folks are more self-regulated than federally regulated, and that's kind of a problem. And I mean, I've had discussions with some of the OSHA folks, and I mean, they'll be the first to tell you that we used to be able to be here before it happened. Now we show up after it's happened. And I mean, there's only a handful of people covering 4 or 5 states, and that's where all these refineries are. And so that's why the companies have gone to the feds and they've worked out these self-regulatory schemes, but it really hasn't helped or slowed down the injuries. Just since 2015, uh, OSHA severe injury, the recordables, the severe injuries, which include amputations and eye losses, you lose your eye, significant hospitalizations. There have been 2,101 since 2015, and that's the serious ones, and that's also not counting the deaths. So it's an absolutely uh, life or death situation working at these refineries.
I'm actually curious. You were saying about, there are federal regulations, but then they have these like self regulations and they have like kind of come together. But is there like for you when you're looking for this stuff, is there a list that even though they've agreed, can you compare and does that help your case? Like if there's something that doesn't match?
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, there are standards in anything we do, and especially in the petrochemical industry, refinery petrochemical industry. Yeah, I mean, there are specific baselines. Outside of those baselines, it's pretty much every worker for themselves. I mean, as long as they keep themselves within the federal regs, the federal regulations aren't really that important to the premise owners. The premise owners are wanting to get that product or that process taken care of, fulfilled, go through, and bang out the end product, and and they make money. And so at the end of the day, all of this is about making money. And so all of these not doing a certain thing, I've spoke about this before. Uh, BP Texas City back in March 23rd, 2004. BP Texas City had that massive disaster. 15, 16 people were killed, uh, thousands injured, multiple burns. It was a horrible incident. About 4,000 claims altogether. They ended up paying out billions of dollars for all 4,000 of those cases. And as it turned out, with our experts and with everything, the entire that litigation involved about 15 core law firms. We were one of the core law firms that was involved in the steering committee that ran everything. And what we found out and what we were able to present to the jury, which we actually went to trial twice in those sets of cases, um, if they were so dogged in making sure everybody had their hard hats. I mean, they would write people up, fire people over not having a hard hat, over not having their Nomax completely zipped up or whatever it was, not having the right boots. But at the same time, they were operating that isomerization unit. They were operating it without a flare, so they just had a blowdown drum that went up, and when it would come out, it would spew out like a geyser. For $75,000, they could have put a flare on top of it. That flare would have ignited. None of that product would have ended up coming down to the ground, and nobody would have died, and everybody would have been fine. It would have cost $75,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is a huge difference.
it is. And they ended up paying about 4 billion total. So 75,000 or 4 billion.
My gosh.
And the beauty of that is they were self-insured.
Well, we were talking about, like, we talked about this already in past podcasts, but let's say, we're talking about multiple contractors again for somebody that's not listened to they're listening today. How do you sort out who's actually made the critical mistake on these sites?
That's absolutely, and that is the necessity of getting your experienced lawyer on site and participating within the root cause investigation with the premise owner and with the governmental entities, the regulatory entities, and being there and being able to, number one, ask questions. Number two, get a complete lay of the land. It also allows us to kind of get site investigations going on as well. Our experts could be there. Our experts may see something that's not being looked at the way they think it needs to be looked at as the experts. And so through the litigation process, that's how we open up those doors to allow us to go out there and test certain things. When explosions happen, things blow up, things become charred, things get thrown away. That's what our experts end up doing, and that's what we do through our experts. And getting in and being part of the investigation and being able to at least represent your client in the production of the investigation is all important.
So then, yeah, during these investigations, say these big companies, they try to control or limit your access to the evidence. How do you get around it? How do you make sure that the truth actually does come out?
That is what being on the ground early. That's why it matters so much. You get on the ground early. You basically throw a wet blanket over all of what they're trying to do, and you file that TRO and you get everything stopped. And that way, you're not essentially at their mercy per se. You become a participant, and being a participant is where you want to be, and that's where a lot of bad things happen in darkness, and I kind of look at it as we're the light that enters that process.
That's awesome. Yeah. So then, while you're doing all this, and most people in even other types of trials as well, a lot of times these cases they drag on for years. How do you stay focused? How do you stay persistent during this long investigation process?
That's pretty easy because it's not like I'm running around taking a bunch of car wreck cases, and which our office does. We take all personal injury cases, but my main focus is the injured worker and his family. And so that is what my goal is, and that is what I give 100%. Um, we came off of about a 2 year, a massive case, and we came off of that. And I usually try to give myself a little bit of time to breathe after that, because I always joke and say these cases sometimes seem like they take a year or two off your life, and they kind of do. But no, it's this is what I believe in, and it's not just my job. Yes, it's my job. Yes, this is how I make money. Yes, this is how I survive and feed my family. But these are the folks I grew up with. My father worked at the refineries, my uncles worked at the refineries, and a ton of my high school buddies, and still today. And actually went to a little high school reunion mixer and ran into a whole bunch of folks that I used to hang out with back 25, 30 years ago plus. And Shockingly, not shockingly, I would say the majority of them work at the refineries. And what's funny is about half of them actually have seen our TikTok and social media and are happy as hell that we're doing it. So yeah, that was pretty fun.
Awesome. That's some real-time praise there. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, do you have any final thoughts like that you wish like more workers would understand, and how fault is proven, like why it matters so much for these families in the long run?
It does matter, and it's a lot of information, and I'm actually shocked that nobody so far has sat down and created a little pamphlet or a small book that basically a guide for working families so that they have a clue when something like this catastrophic happens to them or their loved ones. So that is the purpose of me and three or four others getting together and trying to give a how-to guideline for families whenever they're going through this, because I'm not always available. I am always available once I'm hired, but just randomly, I'm not always available. So to be able to have a guidebook that can walk folks through every aspect of these types of injuries and these types of situations, I think is going to be very important.
That is fantastic. So, those refinery workers out there, go look for that pamphlet when you can. And thank you, Brooke, for, giving us your information today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so very much.
And that is it for today's episode of the Refinery Injury Podcast with Brooks Harrison. If you or someone you love has been affected by a refinery explosion or a plant fire, visit refineryinjury.com to learn more about your options and how Brooks and his team can help. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss another episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.